Denim Couch Podcast. Ooh, whoa, ooh, whoa.
The 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s with Steph with an F.
Hi guys, welcome to the Denim Couch Podcast, where we chill on this denim couch and talk about the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. I'm Stephanie Tanner. Welcome. Hey guys, it's Stephanie Tanner with the Denim Couch Podcast. And this episode is the 80s recap. We're on episode 40. This is the last of the Denim Couch podcasts for now, unless I decide to continue it later on. But let me tell you how great of an experience this has been for me. And it's been a year. It's been an entire year. In August of 2019, I had everything ready for this podcast. I had all my photos finished and my 80s hair done, my 70s hair done, my 60s hair done, and my 50s hair done. And I had planned a bunch of interviews, and that was such a fun summer. I didn't know what I was getting into at all, but I'm sure glad I did. I just jumped on this podcast train. It was so fun. I have spent an entire year, every single week and weekend, compiling stories and interviews and listening to interviews and editing interviews and just telling you what I think about my week and what I think about life. And it has been one of the biggest joys to do this. I hope it's benefited you in some way. I just love these people. If anything, I have gotten so much out of just interviewing these people. I learned so much from asking these people, what makes them happy and how do they bring peace into their lives. So I'm going to miss asking, someone each week what brings them happiness. I'm just ultimately grateful that you have been able to listen and have shared this experience with me. This podcast is who I want to be, who I am, and the things I'm interested in. And it's just a combination of all of me. And I hope it brought some light into your life. It brought a ton of light into my life. I think even though, as we've mentioned many times, 2020 has been a hard year, 2019 to 2020 has been the best year yet for me and for many people in my family and many people around me. And it is those small and simple things that are so good. So good. I can't believe this is over. They're so good. And to start off with, one of the reasons I started this podcast was to just figure out if past generations were happier than generations of today. Because I had been wondering that for a long time. And I wondered that because technology was introduced in between then and now, and it has significantly changed our lives. After going through the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s and interviewing all these people, of course, we live completely different lives. Our situations have changed immensely, and I really think we're dealt a hand that is much different than people were dealt back in the day. And I think we have so many messages that are coming to us each and every day, and we can't get away from from news and from media and from technology, and we just can't get away. The thing that I've learned throughout the course of the years, that's okay. The key thing is that we know who we are. We're focused on what we want, and we're involved in the types of media and type of messages and type of activities that we want to be. We get to choose all these things, and that to me is the most important thing. We get to choose who we follow, what messages we take in, what activities we do. We have the choice to bring light into our lives and bring peace into our lives and surround ourselves with good things that make us happy. I've learned throughout this year what is important to me, and it's all because of the people I was able to interview. So I just want to say a big thank you to all the people that were so wonderful and so willing to share their stories with me. And I just have so much love for them after doing this project. So to review the 80s, I will gladly stop at the 80s because I love it. I love the 80s. So in this recap, we started the 80s episodes with Daria Hutch, and I had interviewed Daria about her parents in the 40s and 50s. I really love Daria's messages on social media. She just has the coolest photos, the coolest perspective. I just love this lady. And one thing she said that I took away from her interview was, you have everything you need to have a great life right in front of you. Such great advice. I loved her interviews. She talked about her outlandish style. She also talked about how Pretty in Pink and The Breakfast Club were basically her existence. When she watched those, she just felt like that summed up her life pretty well. She talked about how fashion and hair were so important to her at that time, and how they would sneak out and go listen to music, go to concerts. They would see Duran Duran and the Smiths, and basically just dance all night at clubs. If you haven't listened to Daria's interview, she's wonderful. Go check it out. The next interview I did was with my mother, Christy Sanders, and Christy was very detailed with her stories. She talked about neighborhood friends and playing all day long outside. They'd pick dandelions. They'd collect those. They'd make bread with mud. They'd collect fireflies and bees and play tag and kick the can at night. She also talked about how her mother would make them smuggle popcorn in the diaper bag. That's what they did when they went to the movies. She said that MTV had just came out. They listened to lots of records. She even talked about the Michael Jackson record being her first one. And she talked about how she would exercise to an aerobics record. I think it was a Jane Fonda record. And every time she jumped, the record would skip. She has so many more details about the 80s, just little things that are so 80s. Allie Wynn was episode number 33, and Allie lived in Louisiana, and they would swing across ditches in the yard with vines. And that sounds like so much fun to me. They did a lot outside, especially in Louisiana on their farm that they lived on. She talked about the Atari and how that was the first game that came out. She'd play a lot of Frogger. They would swim all the time. They had trampolines. They would rent video games at video stores. And one of the things that I really loved about her interview was she has this tradition where every time she's with one of her kids, they'll go out for a treat with mom. So if they're alone together, she'll make sure they get a treat to make her kids feel special. If you haven't listened to Allie's episode, it's great. All these episodes are so great. They have so many 80s details. And Sam Palmer was the next episode, and Sam is hilarious. He is hilarious and generous. Sam took his friends to Hawaii for a month. He just flew them to Hawaii, and they all stayed there for a month, and you should go check out that story if you haven't listened to it, because it's incredible. He talked about just their carefree childhood. Second families, his friends' families would treat him as if they were their own, and vice versa. He talked about hair bands and hunting and partying and all the wild times that they had in the woods, and it is a hoot. And then Sarah. Sarah was episode number 35, Sarah Knockleby. She is so sweet to do this. She talked about the differences between living on the East Coast and West Coast in the 80s, and she talked about how she learned to hate Journey and love new wave music from her time in Connecticut. So she kind of collected certain aspects of her personality from each area that she lived in. She did witness the Valley Girl days in California and talked a lot about the fashion world and how she had fashion ads on her walls and bought high-end perfume and read glamour mags. If you want to hear just even more details about the 80s, Sarah's got some great ones. Marnay Woodland was my next interview with episode number 36. My favorite story with Marnay was how her family went on this hilarious family vacation one summer, and they all drove to Marnay's house in trailers and motorhomes, and they called it the trucking trailer train. Such a great story. Go and check that part out. I liked how she talked about that, in the 80s, they just weren't concerned with what was going on outside of their own little world. They were just in their own little world, and what a huge difference that is today. And they looked forward to the Star Wars premieres at the drive-in. And I just think that would be so cool to go to the drive-in when Star Wars was coming out back then. In episode 37, I interviewed Doug Gunderson, and this has to be one of the most entertaining episodes. If you have not listened to any of the 80s episodes, please listen to Doug's. I think you will be thoroughly entertained. He talked about his fist fight stories, which are incredible. There's an epic deer fighting story in there that you won't want to miss. And he does a really cool in-depth overview of the 80s bands and just the types of people and groups of people and how they all listen to different types of music. Rob Paramore was my next interview, and Rob remembers the beginning of breakdancing, which is incredible. He also talks about raiding his parents' pantries and his friends' pantries, and then they go out on these dangerous three-wheelers and go up to the mountain. And then occasionally they would dive for golf balls at the golf course. They'd sneak into the golf course, and then once they had all these balls, they would go back up to the mountain and hit them off the top of the mountain. And you should just go listen to that story, because that story in itself is hilarious. So Rob had some really entertaining 80s fun times, that's for sure. And episode 39 with Shauna Withy. Shauna had some funny stories as well. In fact, one of my favorites is how they would milk the cows in Montana, where she grew up, and her siblings and her would turn on the station to rock and roll music, and it would actually let out the cow's milk much faster. Her dad would turn on slower country music and slowly milk the cow, and they would just turn on the rock and roll and milk the cow as fast as they could. I love this story because apparently cows are affected by the type of music they listen to. They can milk faster. Who knew? Such a good story. She does a better job telling that than I do, and it's really funny. I think I was laughing through that whole thing. She talks about cowboy concerts in Montana, and then she has traveled the world and talks about connecting with all those people and talking about the differences and how cool it is to connect with others, especially others who live in different countries. So that is my 80s overview. All these people are so wonderful to tell me more about the 80s. There's lots of details that I missed that I really enjoy, and I feel like all these interviews really summed up what the 80s was for these people. Music, fashion, video games, being outdoors, big hair, being a little wild. All of that sums up the 80s pretty well. And I think it was just such a fun time. So, I love the 80s. I wish I could interview everyone about the 80s on a daily basis because I find it so entertaining. To end this podcast, I would like to just leave you with a few things. First off, I think it is so wonderful that we all have choice and that we're all so different. We all come from different worlds, if you think about it. None of us are the same. None of us have the same experiences. None of us should be the same, and none of us need to be the same. The world can be so beautiful because we're all so different. We all get to make different choices. We all get to choose who we want to be, and we all become different things. And because we become different things, we're hopefully able to make the world a better place by the type of person that we are. And it's a beautiful thing to be different and to have different experiences. And we can't all expect the same thing from everyone. So I truly love the fact that all these people that I've interviewed and all the people that I know are different and have different strengths and are blessing me and other people with their strengths. Most of my life has been focused on how to be happy or how to find happiness when that's really not the goal. Is to know that I get to experience this life and that I'm here and lucky to be here and lucky to meet these people and to experience what it is to live. And while I do so, I'm excited that I get to meet so many different people and love the people that are close to me and experience those super small and sweet and simple things. At the end of the day, that's what makes up such an awesome life. And thank you for listening. The Denim Couch Podcast will always be there to listen to if you need to hear about the 80s or some other decade and just take it back to a simpler time. My denim couch will always be in my living room. I will always cherish the year between 2019 and 2020 and how cool this experience was for me. So with that, I say goodbye with lots of love. I will always love the Denim Couch Podcast. I will always love the Denim Couch. And I will always love these people who did these interviews. Goodbye. Wait. You can't miss the embarrassing story of the week. No. Okay. It's that time. It's Steph with an F's embarrassing story of the week. Okay, so this week's embarrassing story, we couldn't do a recap without this, is this pregnant lady, myself, went to Del Taco to get a taco. And I was running many errands, and I had guacamole on this taco. And as I was about to go into the police station, I checked my mirror beforehand. That was the smartest thing I could have done because I had encrusted guacamole just below my nose, and it looked like the nastiest, brightest, greenest booger you could possibly imagine. And so luckily for me, what could have been one of the most embarrassing moments of my life was not as embarrassing as it could have been. So I got my napkin and cleaned that mess up off my nose and went into the police station, and all was well. But guys, if you can imagine, like, this guacamole was disguised. What was guacamole looked like the most disgusting booger ever, and it was pretty epic. So with that, that's the end of my embarrassing stories. I will still experience them weekly. I'm sorry you don't get to hear about them, but thank you for enjoying them this year. Hopefully a couple of them made you chuckle. All right. Bye.
If you came here for mental health help, please go visit your doctor. If you're looking for some mental health tips, Dr. Daniel Amen is someone I follow. I love what he has to say and offer. I think his website is brainhealthassessment.com, and he just has some awesome checklist items that go over brain health habits that you should be doing to have better brain health. I want to say there's like 5 to 10 items, and if you have those, if you're working on those habits and trying to improve them to improve your brain health, you'll also improve your happiness level, because brain health equals mental health. So keep your brains happy and healthy, and check out Dr. Daniel Amen. This is not sponsored. I just really like what he has to say, and I think it's really beneficial. I think it can help a lot of people. It's actually very matter of fact, kind of obvious, but yeah, we neglect so many of these habits daily, and I do feel like, if you're feeling unhappy, that may be one of the reasons you're unhappy, because you're neglecting your brain health, which is also your mental health, and trying to improve these habits could really help. So check him out. If you have any stories from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, please get in contact with me. Let's chat. I want nothing more than to chat about the past. I want nothing more than to chat about the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. If you have any specific questions that I'm not asking that you would like to know about these eras while interviewing these people, please let me know. I would love some advice. and I would love your input. So what would you guys like to know?